Well, thank you very much, Angie, and thank you for that very, very kind introduction. And yeah, Angie's quite right. I was quite moved coming here today because my first job in higher education, September 1991, remember it well, was a staff development manager at the University of Plymouth. It was my first time in higher education, and by Christmas I wondered what the hell I'd done, I have to say. There were people who didn't turn up on time, they were rude, they questioned everything that you said. You couldn't mention the management word, and that was my job, management development. And it was a bit of a nightmare, I have to say. So I sat down on New Year's Day and I made a list of all the positives and all the negatives and had a look at it, and I thought, I've got to make a decision. I've got to stay or I've got to go. So I decided to stay, and 25 years on nearly, it's the best decision I think I ever made. And surely, for me, doing the staff development job at the University of Plymouth, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today without it. And the experience that I had was really amazing. It was probably one of the most scariest jobs I've ever done at times as well. But if you just imagine, you've got a competency complex, okay? So you never think you're good enough. Actually, I feel like I blagged my way into the job because I always knew I wanted to do management development, and I saw it advertised. I was working as a consultant, so I did lots of kind of consultancy work, but I'd never actually done management development myself. But I wrote a very good two-side paper for the job. And everybody liked it because it was so short. And it was only so short because I ran out of anything else to say. So then I got the job. So there I've got a competence complex. And I'm trying to do leadership and management development with the brightest, most clever, most challenging people on the universe. And yeah, so it was a bit stressful at times. But again, it was really good learning. So I don't underestimate the jobs that you're doing currently in the current climate. And also getting what you've done valued and maintaining its relevance. And the one thing that I really, really learned was context is everything. So you really need to understand the policy, the financial context, and the staffing context, the people in which you operate. So it was quite interesting. You know when you write these things, oh, you've heard this before, you write these things about what you're going to speak about, and I read it on Monday and I thought, oh, really? Is that what I'm doing? I thought I was doing something completely different. But I thought, actually, the timing for this is really great. It talks about an exploration of policy, financial and regulatory trends which will be impacting on higher education. And I will share that with you, but I'm also conscious that you've just been spoken to with a really fascinating and gripping presenter. I was watching you, you know, you were all paying attention, you were all really with her all the way through, but nonetheless, you have been listening for an hour. So I'm not going to speak first, you're going to speak first. And what I would like you to do is just have a brief discussion on your tables about, and pool your knowledge about, what does it say here? The policy trends. So what's going on? What do you know about the TEF actually? What's it saying? What's happening to the regulatory challenges or changes in the sector? What's happening to the finances in the sector generally? What's happening to governance? What's happening which your institution's really tussling with, keeping your Vice-Chancellor, Royke might perhaps, but let's get to the nitty-gritty of the tough stuff. So on your tables for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to hear from you, and then I'll see if mine matches in some way or another.
We've got a microphone.
Can you say who you are and where you're from? Because you all might know each other, but I'm afraid I don't.
I'm Frank Jordan, I'm the head of staff development at the University of Northampton. The TEF is obviously a big thing for us. We're not necessarily a research-intensive organization. So worries about the TEF and what we'll do about that. Budget cuts across the sector, of course. Increasing commercialization of the sector is a massive thing. I mean, I was quite struck yesterday about the thing about institutional versus monastic and the managerialism that's coming in. Well, you know, the fact is we're operating in a much more manager-driven environment. So coming to terms with that reality across the sector, I think, is a big thing. The balance of research and teaching overall, you know, is affecting all of our institutions to different degrees. So those are the things that sort of came to the fore.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks, really good summary. Excellent. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Anybody else like to add something?
Lily Brown at Cranfield. We were talking about things like student fees, income generation that's not from government funding bodies. We were talking about the size of the strategic plans that our organisations have got, workload of academics and how we rely on them so much. And also the competition between the universities, but also we're talking about the customer expectation, which is really increasing, and potential, I think Frank mentioned the consumer legislation, etc. So all of those things seem to be sort of important for our universities.
Yeah, excellent. So we're bringing the student bit in there as well. Did you read the Daily Mail? I think it was yesterday, where they were listing all these vice chancellors who are earning £600,000 a year. Well, it wasn't really. They're all kind of departure packages, but it doesn't really matter. You know, and students are going to be looking at that and saying, you know, well, they're paying £9,000 and you're going to be putting it up, and clearly the TEF is a way to take the capital fees eventually. So yeah, really interesting dimensions there. Anything else to add? Well, keep it to yourself for now, because your job is going to be thinking about, isn't it? Well, how are we going to reposition, rethink our staff development offer to actually meet these growing demands and expectations and drivers for change that we're facing? So how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we provide continuing quality, absolutely tip-top relevance at the lowest possible cost to our institutions? That's going to be really important, and I think that's what will differentiate the excellence of staff development in institutions, and will be the thing that gets you noticed and gets you the budget that you need to do your job at the end of the day. So what I'm going to do, what I'm going to share with you here is, I think that's left click, I'm told. Yeah, okay. The purpose of this session really is to I hope, to stimulate your thinking and get you thinking around staff development 2015-2020 and rethinking the staff development proposition, because I think that's what you're faced with, actually. And so I'm going to explore some of the policy landscape. I'm going to look at the financial health of the sector. I want to look at staffing, and then I want to say, well, what does that mean for leadership, particularly at the moment? And this probably is a bit Anglo-centric, but these are the reports that are coming out. In terms of finance, it's difficult whether it's Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, okay? They're all facing massive cuts. I meet with the Welsh Funding Council, the Scottish Funding Council and the Northern Ireland Funding Council as well, regularly. All huge, great financial cuts. In terms of the policy landscape here, well, where England leads, others tend to follow, and there are always a kind of knock-on. And you can't have a TEF in England without people thinking it's UK and their implications. We're working in the Leadership Foundation at the moment with Egypt, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, India, Burma. Okay, they don't think about England. Australia, I do a lot of work with New Zealand. They don't think about England. They think about everything that happens in England as the UK. And so, you know, where one leads, there are implications. And what I've done actually, because as I said on Monday, I thought, oh, this is interesting, what shall I do here? There are 3 reports out this week. This is HEFGE's Financial Health of the Higher Education Sector. This is UCE's Higher Education Workforce Survey. And of course, this is the green paper. Looking very white, I would say, however. You would think they'd put a green cover on, wouldn't you, at least? Play the game. So I went through those and I pulled out some key information, facts and data. It must be my 12 years at HEFGE is maybe a bit nerdy on that front, but I actually think it could be very helpful. So here we are, green paper at a glance, okay? A new office for students. I was at the HEFGE annual meeting yesterday. They seem pretty cool about this. Actually, what it's proposing in terms of regulatory reform, they talk about simplifying the regulatory architecture. A lot of the stuff that HEFGE currently does is likely to remain in this office for students. The big questions are whether they will be a single regulator or whether they will retain NET funding at all. And funding is a regulatory tool, so there's quite a strong argument to keep it, but BIS would like to pull the funding in. BIS certainly want to pull the policy element in. And there's a question about research. The green paper is very, very light on research. Don't read into that it's safe. There are big debates to be had about the dual support system. We're still waiting Paul Nurse's review of research. So the only thing that Joe Johnson has said is that they are committed to the dual support principle. That doesn't mean to say the dual support architecture or infrastructure as it stands. So, new officer students, there's the possibility of targets for providers who fail to make progress on widening participation. So there's a regulatory tool for you, and this is a strengthening of kind of conditions for funding. So the TEF is going to start next year. It's going to be quite simple and straightforward. If you've got a QA, you will automatically pass at level 1. Year 2, there will be higher levels of TEF requirements. And the financial incentives will kick in from 18-19, and they will be differentiated in year 2. Future TEF, they're looking or proposing 4 different levels with a panel of independent experts. It's beginning to sound a bit more like the REF, however. Again, moving towards more differentiated funding for institutions. It would appear that the government favours a 5-year TEF award, and the Secretary of State could be given the power to raise tuition fees beyond inflation. So here we go, the first hint that this is about taking off the fee cap. Other elements of the Green Paper, accelerated entry to market for new entrants, accelerated route to degree awarding powers, university title, no cap on student numbers, but there will be new provisions to protect the student interest. That top paragraph, that could be quite scary, I think, for institutions. There is real competition now being brought. If it feels like there's competition now, my old boss at Hefke, Alan Langlands, who was, in terms of leaders, I think one of the best leaders I've ever worked for, he went to Leeds University as Vice-Chancellor, and I saw him 1 year into the job, and he said, "My God, Alison," he said, "we used to talk about competition in the sector." He said, "It's red in tooth and claw." He said, "I've never seen anything like it, and it's going to get worse." It's really going to get worse, I think. So, allocation of teaching grant, if they've got it, will be carried out by the Office for Students, and all the usual financial sustainability function and so on and so forth will be carried out. It's proposed by both the Office and possibly by the BIS officials as well, so there's a lot of room for manoeuvre there. The aim is a single, transparent regulatory framework, and the only infrastructure change that they've really made is to bring OFFA, the Office of Fair Access, and with Hefke back together again, because actually the other stuff just needs too much legislation or change to achieve that. I think there are questions, though, about whether the new office would actually outsource something like QAA again, or whether they would bring it in, or whether they would outsource something like the TEF operation. Who knows? Those are all up for grabs. And the government are kind of piggybacking this whole TEF on the back of a big social mobility push. And that's the reason why the white paper was delayed. It was ready in October to go out. And I know that because I was in Egypt with a guy who wrote it and went to dinner with him, which was really interesting. And the reason was because they wanted this big social mobility push. So the key focus of the TEF at the moment is very outcomes focused in terms of education and employment outcomes. It's all about measuring learning gain in future and looking at the outcomes of the inputs of your higher education provision. Although I think there is a strong case being made that outcomes is not enough in terms of the overall student experience, and outcomes measurement will not bring innovation in teaching and learning. It's only when you start to measure things that they get done, and unless you measure that kind of innovation, good practice, people will, I think, return to safe pedagogical practice. And universities will be encouraged to adopt the grade point average. I don't know what that means for you in a university anymore. I'm too far removed from it. But sure enough, it'll be more change. So that's the Green Paper at a glance. There is a fair bit more in that. That productivity challenge is at the heart of this, and what Kathy was saying before about productivity, that is the big driver. So let's have a look at the financial health of the sector, shall we? So I have to say, I was in Hefke, I think, for about 11 years, and we had one of these reports every year, and this is the first time I've seen a report as bad as this. Also, I would say we used to spend a lot of time thinking about what we would put into this report, because this sends a very clear message about the sector. It sends it to the banks, and the banks control the interest rates. And you will see, if you look at this last bullet point here, universities are planning a substantial increase in capital investment By 2018, £17 billion worth of investment, which is 60% higher than the previous 4 years. Now, this isn't money they've got on a piggy bank or down the back of the settee. This is money they're borrowing. And if you actually put out a report which begins to kind of shake the confidence that higher education might not be quite the safe bet that it used to be, then banks will start thinking about their interest rates, and bond markets will be thinking about the rates that they offer. And if there's a kind of possibility of a perfect storm brewing, but let's look at this in a systematic way. So projections, weakening of financial performance, but financially stable generally, although huge variations in institutional performance. In the longer term, though, we will see surpluses falling and cash levels falling alongside a rise in borrowing. And you add those up, that is not sustainable in the long term. As I said, huge variations between institutional performance, between the highest and lowest, and liquidity falling to the lowest level in nearly a decade. Okay, so this is how much money you've got free in assets and to be able to cover costs if anything went wrong in your institution. And that's a key indicator that we would used to look at HEFGI. So, you know, all these things adding up, not looking terribly good. So, borrowing predicted to rise. Operating surpluses overall falling to a dip of below 2.5% in the period from now to 27-18. Even at 3.9% or 3.3%, these are very small margins for the massive organisations that your universities are to operate in. And any small changes in income or the costs can have a very big impact. So, you know, running a university is tricky business, basically, nowadays. I mean, it's been tricky, but we've had that golden decade of investment. So, and there's an increasing reliance on overseas income. What's very interesting, when we were at HEFGI, we were amazed that institutions would predict increases in student numbers, and they always hit predictions, if not overshot them. Last year, for the first year, they didn't make prediction. The prediction this year coming compared to 2001 numbers for international students is a 400% increase on 2001. Bearing in mind they didn't make last year, that would bring in about just under 4.5 million to institutions. And you've only got to find a 5% fall in income from international students, and that would put the whole sector in a deficit by next year. 5% fall. So we've got Modi, the Indian Prime Minister over here, who's pretty cross about the visa situation. So they're sending all their students to Australia, who are raking it in. The visa situation is another ingredient in the perfect storm that could be brewing. Even projections for full-time home and EU students at undergraduate level are showing a marginal decrease. So it's not surprising that institutions are cautious about student recruitment. So the biggest risks to universities' future finances are a fall in recruitment and student recruitment and retention, a fall in recruitment of overseas students, further unanticipated cuts in public funding. Institutions are making their assumptions on no major cuts in public funding. Oops, and yet we know that BIS as an unprotected department is going to face really quite swingeing cuts this year, which will be translated into HE because we are seen as the fat cats. And Treasury certainly think we are awash with money. There is a rise in the cost of borrowing or staff pensions. We know that there will be rises in this because this is not going to be resolved in terms of pensions in the short term. And then all the visa regulation stuff. So there's a whole bundle of stuff which is going to be giving your Vice-Chancellor, your FD, your top team real headaches in how they move forward. We're not even thinking about international rankings yet and all the other things that go on. NSS, REF, so on and so forth. From this year, spending is expected to rise at a faster rate than income. Therefore, surpluses will go down again. So we're beginning to raid the savings bank. There is a rise in funds probably coming from tuition fees, but if it's only at the rate of inflation, that's not a lot. So you begin to see why there's some kind of rationale behind a TEF, which provides changes in fees, but there will be winners and there will be losers in that. And the hefty grant for teaching is planned to fall to just by about 50% between now and 2018. Sorry, I left that off. So for those of you like a picture speaks 1,000 words. This is what it looks like. So tuition fees from students planned to go up, but you can see there is a projection for overseas income to go up as well, but that's uncertain and unsure. The research grants and contracts, well, if it's protected, they're pretty standard, and other operating income pretty standard. It's the bottom line, funding from funding council grants, which is dropping. And that's adding in all the little extra bits, so small and specialist institutions, high cost subjects, student opportunity funding. There will be changes in, from grants to loans. So there's huge financial pressure coming on the sector. So the other thing that HEFCE showed at the annual meeting yesterday, and interestingly they didn't put this slide up on their website because I had a look yesterday. If you imagine a future world where there is a 3-year cumulative impact which goes like this, 3-year per annum increase of 2% in staff costs, a 5% cut in government funding, which is not very much, a 5% drop in EU home undergraduate students, and a 5% drop in overseas students, that would give every institution in the country an average deficit of 17%. So that would be the average deficit. That would be a variance in the budget of 5.4 billion in terms of English higher education. All right. Over the last 4 years, higher education in England only saved 1 billion. You'd have to save 5 times that amount in 3 years from now, by 2018. So, the amount of savings, so there's going to be huge push on productivity, huge push on efficiency and savings. So this is why the pressure on value for money and cost cutting and cost saving is going to be absolutely massive going forward. Let's move forward, shall we? Let's have a look at staffing. So I went through this report, and what I did, I just pulled out some slides that I thought were interesting in terms of making us think about what are the issues that institutions are facing, because we're only as good as the staff that we have working for us. So in terms of recruitment difficulties, actually not too bad. Information technology has again come through staff as one of the most difficult to recruit areas, followed by estates. It's always the same, estates, finance, HR down, I put HR in, it's not really difficult to recruit there, I'm afraid, so no market supplements for us, I'm afraid, but never mind. That just gives you a picture of recruitment. This is what institutions are doing, the changes they're implementing to improve employee retention. So if you're at the back and you can't read it, the top is improving line managers' people skills, particularly academic staff, improving induction process, academic staff, offered coaching, mentoring and buddy systems, academic staff, increased learning and development opportunities for academics, improved selection techniques for academics, clearer, improved career pathways, and so on and so forth. So these are the top, there are many more in the list, but this is your world, okay? There is a job for you to do. And increasingly, it's through that kind of staff development, organisation development, and leadership development that institutions are seeing this as the key to transformational change. So given the drive on the efficiency agenda, what are the steps that have been taken to improve efficiency and effectiveness in human resource management? Okay, new process systems improvements. We're all going through that. I don't know any organisation, even the Leadership Foundation is looking at all its systems and processes. We're putting our customers at the centre of our processes, not finance, not marketing, not whatever else. We want to put our customers there. Restructuring and redeploying staff, increasing the use of direct recruitment methods, reducing spend on agency staff, reducing spend on additional payments, and reducing headcount. Those are the top 6 ways in which universities are improving efficiency in HRM. At the same time as all this is going on, universities are really rethinking the roles that they need to move forward into the future. So a count was done of all of the submissions into this UCEA survey, and 390 new job titles were created since the period that this last survey was created. And a Wordle was done on all of these, and you can see the words that are standing out in terms of the changing job market and where universities are going. Digital student, research, business, development, academic, support, project, social marketing, comms. So there are some clear themes, I think, coming out where people are seeing the priorities and how the job market is changing. So where does that take me? Well, it takes me into leadership, the final part. And I hadn't realised that you'd had Richard Bolden here. I wish I'd come, because I've spoken to him a few times, but I would love to have heard him speak about his work. And I see Leslie has kindly brought the actual research report with her, and it's out on the stand if you would like a copy of it. So the first thing is, if we're thinking about TEF in your institutions, and if you're from Scotland or Wales, you don't need to have a TEF to know the importance of teaching quality, teaching innovation, impact on students, etc., because we're all competing. So academic leadership, is it different, is it distinctive? Well, I think you probably all know the answer to that question, but I love this slide from Rob Goffey and Gareth Jones because it took me right back to my roots, and I'm sure you recognise this. So what do you do when you are working with smart people? Well, I like to think that this, our most recent stimulus paper, does provide some potential ideas and ways forward. And what I particularly like about this document is it's not just a research report. It has a whole series of tools, techniques, checklists, frameworks which you can use to help think about how you can move towards developing and sustaining shared leadership. Because I think this is the route to the academic leadership conundrum, I suppose you would call it. And when I read it, I must admit, I was invited to do the foreword. When I read it, I thought, well, it's a bit difficult, really, because this is just like it was when I joined in 1991. And on the one hand, you think nothing's changed, and then you think, well, what's different about it? And I think the thing which is significantly different is all of these pressures that I have just talked about are driving, on the one hand, a very corporate behavioural managerial approach to running universities, because of league tables, because of financial pressures, because of all of these things. And on the other hand, that is disrupting and being repelled by academics, and it's pushing academic leadership below ground. And so we need to find a way of re-engaging and distributing that power of leadership throughout the organisation. And there's no shortcut to that. It is slog, 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 engage, 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 evolve, evolve, evolve. And again, I don't think necessarily anything new, but sometimes it's helpful to refresh and remind ourselves. So this is what you can find in the report. This is called the sailing ship model of academic leadership, which is very neat. I think it's kind of almost idealised, and it talks about academic leadership, and it talks about academic management, and it comes through almost in many respects. Well, the first thing is academic leaders usually choose to become leaders, either through esteem placed on through their academic discipline and work and what have you, or they put themselves forward. So anybody who ends up being an academic leader has usually chosen that path. But this is the kind of the neat, tidy version. I won't go into the details of it because I'm sure Richard took you through that. But the latest research that they conducted, both here in Australia and in Australia, said actually that model is no longer working. It's much more of a sinking ship model, and as I said, it's the global marketplace, the student as customer, driving competition for funding and resources, the corporate management and leadership, performance management, and so on and so forth. It's completely distorting that model, and this is where we see academic leadership going underground and declining commitment to the institution. So that's your challenge about bringing these people back, all right? That's your challenge. Because, pardon?
We need some lifeboats.
You need some lifeboats, absolutely, some flotation gear and all the rest of it, and then just jump in and fish them back out of the water. And when you think about the TEF, you know, this is anathema, isn't it, in so many respects to our academic colleagues. What was it Kathy was saying? You know, nobody likes to be micromanaged, them least of all. But I do think this is a really interesting, thought-provoking piece, and every single person I've shown this to, and Vice Chancellors included, they really engage with this. and they say, right, we're going to go back and we need to put leadership development in. So I'm delighted to hear that. But again, they're seeing it's the way forward. And let's not forget the professional and support staff. In terms of leadership and careers, typically, there was a nice, neat hierarchical structure like this, wasn't it? You worked your way up through the levels and eventually you became whatever it says at the top, the director or something like that. But even the world of professional and support staff is changing. We're seeing much more distributed networks, people being promoted or given more leadership responsibility, much more akin to their specialism. You see it particularly in careers, IT, library services, and you're seeing a hybrid kind of operator emerging. And I'm sure many of you have also got additional specialisms to your staff development. You've got a great understanding of pedagogy, a great understanding of how things change in organisations. But I'm also sure that each one of you has got something else that you're great at, which has probably got a policy focus or some kind of additional element to it. And you get invited to do different things because you really understand the organisation. So I've got a few slides on distributed leadership, and I'm sure you already know this, and Richard will show you, so I just really want to flip through it. But I think the slides that really say it for me is it's very much moving from that kind of industrial centralised model with a couple of people at the top running everybody else to, you know, with leaders and followers and tasks and power and control, to this very much shared sense of direction with alignment and commitment, involving a far wider set of people and motivating those people to take on that role, I think, is the challenge. This is the picture that did it for me, okay? So it used to be the big fish chasing the little fish, telling them what to do. Now actually the little fish should be chasing the big fish, and it's leadership from the bottom. These 6 E's on the side you will find in the research paper with an explanation, with tools around each of them, ideas and suggestions for tackling each of these. And what the paper presents is if you get these 6 in place and working, then you're well on your way to that journey. So a collective approach to shared leadership really consists of these 4 elements: involving the people, involvement of a broad range of experts and contributing their knowledge. So the first job I ever had to do, actually, at Plymouth was do a performance management appraisal system. That was the one that nearly did me in, I think, really, because the head of School of Architecture said, Alison, I don't mind the questions, but I couldn't possibly write in a box. I said, fine, take the box out. And then there was the unions argy-bargying about this language. So I sat down with a bunch of professors and said, could you just rewrite this for me? Because, you know, and I was, you know, my punctuation wasn't good and all that. And they rewrote it and it was fine. So, you know, involving the experts in whatever was trying to create is a great idea. Processes which support individuals sharing their expertise. This is not rocket science. Professional development and resources. Using your resources in a way to encourage collaboration, network and partnerships, not to drive competition and people apart. And then the other dimensions, of course, are the context. You know, context is everything. That's my mantra. Where leadership is regarded as relying less on positional power and more placing trust and expertise. That's what Kathy was saying. It works for us. Culture, in which leadership relies less on control, more on respect for experience, change, multiple levels, and relationships. You know, if there's only one thing that makes this work, it's relationships. Relationships are all, I would say. But there is this thing about culture, and the one thing I will finish up by saying is it's not a question about vertical leadership or shared leadership. The real issue is, when is leadership most appropriately shared? How does one develop it? And how do you use both vertical and shared leadership to get the best, basically, out of your people? And I think this is where your expertise and your thinking can really come to the fore. We've talked a little bit about culture, and I've got this really favourite video clip that I like. It's in our management development resources, and you can use it as well. There are a lot of things said about culture. Actually, how do I go back? I've just tried doing this. This is what really fascinates me, and I hope if I can't play it, we'll send it to you somehow, or make sure that you can find it yourselves. The thing about why is culture so important? Well, let's just read this. So why is it that reasonable people are just so difficult when it comes to change? And we have all these communication problems, and you say things 6 times and nobody hears you, and they carry on doing the same. Why is it so difficult? It's beyond me, and it's very interesting coming into a leadership position. I've had quite a few leadership positions at various levels in the organisation. And being chief executive is very different. And Leslie will have lots of feedback she can tell you when I'm gone. I'm learning such a lot on this journey, and the best way to do this job is not to think about being a chief executive, it's just a job. Otherwise I think I would melt and have a nervous turn. But I find myself saying things to my team, and I find myself saying it again and again, I think something wrong with me in the way I'm communicating here. And they probably feel the same. So this isn't, you know, I think this is something which that's why it's cultural. And the thing that really, really kind of did it for me in making sense of this was the 5 monkeys fable, and Professor Eddie Obang tells this absolutely fantastically. The 5 monkeys fable actually comes out of some real research which was done in the late 1950s by a guy called Stevenson, and it was about learnt behaviour in rhesus 2 monkeys. And if there are any biologists here, I know they're chimpanzees, but they're much prettier than the monkeys that I could find. So, now rhesus 2 monkeys are only 2% different in their DNA to us, so there's a lot to be learnt from their behaviour, I think. And so there is a proper scientific paper, proper scientific behaviour, all underpinning this. But Eddie tells it in a way which, at the end of the day, is like nobody else I've heard. So I hope we can play this. Oh no, let's go back. How do I escape? Can I have some help to escape?
Yes, previous.
Oh, I have to put my glasses on for that, sorry.
It's the second one from the top.
I can see it, yeah, thank you. Let's try going up. Okay, let's see if we can get... Here we go.
I want to tell you about a story about an experiment which I came across. Apparently a group of researchers were looking at behavior. What they did was they got 5 monkeys and they put them in a big cage. And they hung a banana from the top of the cage and they put a step ladder leading up to the banana, and they stood by with a hose. And what happened was the monkey spotted the banana and started to climb up to, of course, a step ladder, at which point the researchers sprayed the lead monkey with really cold water from the hose and then sprayed all the other monkeys for good measure. So of course they went to shiver in the corner. But after a while they warmed up and they went, hey, the banana's still there. I like bananas. So they started to climb again. At which point they did exactly the same thing. They sprayed the lead monkey with cold water and then they sprayed all the others, whether they were moving or not, for good measure. And so they're all sitting there shivering again. And then they warm up a bit and one of the monkeys goes, oh, it's a banana, I like bananas. And he starts to go for the banana, at which point all the other monkeys jump on him and beat him up. And so, because they don't want to get wet. So they're all sitting there, looking at the banana, wanting the banana, but all scared to go because they don't want to get wet. At that point, what happens is you take one of the monkeys out of the cage and replace them with a brand new monkey. The new monkey comes in, looks at the other monkey sitting there, and goes, it's a banana! There's even a step ladder! These monkeys, stupid! So he starts to go up the stairs for the banana, at which point all the monkeys jump on him and beat him up. So he's beaten up, and he doesn't really know why he's been beaten up, but he's been beaten up. At this point, you take another one of the original monkeys out and replace that monkey with another new monkey. The new monkey comes in again, looks at the existing monkeys, who are all looking at the banana, drooling, not moving. He goes, banana, it's obvious, we're monkeys, banana. Starts to climb the stairs. They all jump on him and beat him up, including the other new monkey, who joins in enthusiastically beating away, even though he doesn't know why. He's never been wet. So at this point, apparently you can take out the 3rd monkey and replace him, same behavior, 4th monkey, and you can go all the way to 5 monkeys. And they'll all sit there, staring at the banana, drooling, looking at it, and if you say to them, hey, hang on, you're monkeys, it's a banana, don't you want to go for the banana? They'll say, look, you don't understand, Eddie, that's just the way we do things around here. So sometimes our behavior isn't actually linked to what's going on, and it's just worth thinking about that. Thanks very much.
So thank you, Eddie. Yeah, it's just worth thinking about that, isn't it? It's just the way we do things around here, culture. So that is in, I think it's our latest management development resource, is it, Leslie? For
Caught in the middle.
Caught in the middle, for middle managers, I think particularly, but I've used it with vice-chancellors and they all love it to bits. And what's also in the resource is a whole series of questions. I'll see if I can get out of this now. Oh, here we go. So there are a whole series of slides which follow on, which you can use. You can get people to think, well, what are our punishments? What are the equivalent of our hoses? And what are our rewards? What are the rewards that are really valued here in this university? And then there are a whole series of slides that you can use like this. There are a whole series of learning from the 5 monkeys. These are questions for people to discuss around the table. What can the first new monkey do in order to promote reflection? I've translated that into something which was less about monkeys, I think, if it comes up, because I was a bit embarrassed about using it with vice chancellors, but they've responded better to this question, actually. And that looks like it's the end of my slideshow, I think. So I wanted to share that with you at the end, just to give you a flavour of what you can find in our management development resources online on the LF, for those of you who are members anyway. But also because I think it makes the point about, as you journey into this helping your organisation change and becoming absolutely indispensable to your Vice-Chancellor and your top teams, because you get it, use some of those figures and facts that I've given you in papers that you write, and I think, God, they've really got it. This kind of stuff, I hope, will help you on your journey to transformational change and delivering quality, which is extremely relevant at the best possible cost. I wish you good luck.
Thank you, Alison, for that. Again, very thought-provoking and lots of new information. I think you have to go.
I've got to go at 12. So if there are any questions, I don't know whether it's a coffee break now.
Okay,
I can do questions or in the coffee break, or and I'm sorry, I didn't actually, because we're finishing. I would really like you to reflect on. Oh gosh, this is completely jammed, isn't it? There are some questions in the slide which actually talks to you about saying what are the implications for all of this for you and your roles as you go forward, and focusing on. Oh, well done. It's a bit further up. Something for you to be thinking about, the implications for this financial policy strategic context as you go back and kind of reinvent. There you are, that's the one. Oh, don't worry. You'll find it on the slides, but that's what I would really invite you to. It's having a kind of wobble, isn't it? Never mind. So, I mean, if there are any questions, I'm happy to ask them, but I wouldn't want to get between you and the coffee. You've had a long morning.
Okay. Nick's.
Before you all just a bit of coffee, 2 things. One, we're aware that quite a few of you need to get off for taxes and whatever. So if it's okay with everybody, we're going to shorten lunch to half an hour so that this afternoon session can roll forward. So we should be finished before anybody needs to leave for taxes. And there's another raffle needs to be drawn before we scoot off. Okay.
Yes, so there's a raffle, and also a reminder, because we've got some delegates who are new today, and so they won't know about these lovely people who are standing around videoing for us. These are students from Bristol University who have very short notice, which is why they're heroes, helping us by videoing today. And the presentations at the end, we won't be putting the entire presentations up on the web. Because otherwise, I mean, that's not a very good marketing tool, is it? Because otherwise people wouldn't need to come to the conference. But we are going to be sort of splicing it and creating a great sort of tool from that. But the other thing that's going to be happening, and some of you have already been approached, is they're going to be asking you questions in break times and lunch times, questions around kind of what do you get out of a conference and what do you enjoy and so on, so that we can